Hello, and welcome again to Freedom Keepers Senior Edition, where we encourage seniors to stand up and speak out for freedom, love of country, your beliefs, your families, and faith. Today's episode is entitled Immigration Part 1, Facing the Challenge, currently a very hot topic. This topic is so broad, and in order to cover everything that we wanted to in just one episode, so we've split it up. Our next episode will be Part 2, entitled Outside Influencers. So, one of the cornerstones of our great country is immigration and always has been. We are all the product of our ancestors, immigrating here from somewhere else. And don't forget the inscription on the tablet held by our Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. However, in the past few years, particularly under the Biden administration, our borders were thrown wide open. And the rough guesstimate is that we have 20 million immigrants that came into our country illegally. And that has created problems, to say the least. Beverly, before we get to that, though, I know you wanted to speak briefly about the history of immigration in our country. I think it's really important for people to know the background.
Yes, thank you very much, Irene, and welcome everyone. From around 1900 to 1915, there were over 15 million immigrants that arrived from Southern, Central, and Eastern Europe. These immigrants played a very significant role in shaping the cultural and social landscape of America. They brought essential skills, labor, worked in construction, on railroads, and various infrastructures, and they contributed to the making of our country. They didn't ask for handouts, Irene. They wanted to work to provide for their families and to better their lives. They wanted to become part of that American dream. They fled their home countries because of economic hardship, poverty, famine, and religious persecution. Did you know that there were over 2 million Eastern European Jews that arrived here between 1880 and 1920 to escape violence and worked in garment factories and other places and other trades? Many immigrants were unskilled, but many of them brought different trades like tailoring, baking, carpentry. They contributed to the growth of America. They all came through Ellis Island, Irene, and this opened in 1892. They conducted inspections of immigrants, including questions about their health and their background. If you coughed, had a fever, or looked ill in any way, you went back to your own country. Something to note over here, Irene, something from my research. The shipping companies that brought these immigrants to America, they were required to return the same immigrants at their own expense. So if they failed to meet the criteria for America, they were shipped back. And this was all part of the 1891 Immigration Act under United States law.
So, Beverly, just to be clear, the shipping companies that brought them over were required to pay for their return fare if they shipped them back.
Yes, they did. Yes.
Wow. Yeah. And even though we all learned a lot of this growing up, we tend to forget about these first immigrants, the hardships they endured, and their contributions to forming our great society.
Yes, and Irene, also, there were so many legislative changes that were made after 1915. There was the Immigration Act of 1917. Immigrants were required to pass literacy testing. And then there was the Dillingham Commission. This commission agreed that if an immigrant committed a crime within the first 5 years of residency, they were deported. They were doing something at that time to keep control over the people that were destroying this country. Laws continue to be updated with the Immigration Act of 1924. It favored Northern Europeans and limited Southern Europeans and Asians based on previous census of 1890 with quotas. This was the time the first Border Patrol was formed.
Wow, that's interesting, Beverly, and glad you're giving us a recap of these laws. It's worth noting that we do have quite a few immigration laws in place on the books that have been there for really over 100 years.
Yeah, and let's not forget about how the United States enjoyed benefits from all of this immigration. That was all legal immigration. They enjoyed the economic growth because it increased human capital innovation and productivity. It filled labor gaps, reduced inflation, and it added to diversity and other perspectives. We grew into a very diverse society. And did you know that from 1921 to 1924, we began imposing stricter regulations with the Emergency Quota Act of 1921 and the Immigration Act of 1924? And that established limits on the number of immigrants that came to this country. And this spurred illegal immigration, Irene.
Oh, so tell us, what brought on this Emergency Quota Act?
Glad you asked. Irene, this act was known as the Immigration Act of 1921, and it was passed because of the large influx of Southern and Eastern Europeans immigrating to this country annually. Did you know that it restricted annual arrivals from any country to 3% of those nationalities' foreign born population residing in the United States based on the United States 1910 census? It favored Northern and Western Europeans and reduced Southern Eastern Europeans. Simply put, it limited Bulgaria, Croatia, Greece, Romania, Slovenia, and the Western Balkans like Bosnia, Kosovo, Montenegro, Serbia. This act drastically reduced immigration levels once introduced. Further, the 1924 Act was signed into law by Calvin Coolidge, and it effectively banned Asian immigration quotas so severely that it altered American demographics for decades. This act encouraged illegal immigration.
So we have quite a background. And before we discuss more about illegal immigration, folks, don't get me wrong. I'm very much in favor of immigration. That is legal immigration. In fact, my parents went through it and I was first generation born here. My brother was born in a DP camp after the war in Germany. My husband also went through it. I've always felt like I've immigrated twice as a result, and I've never immigrated anywhere. And I still get incredibly offended when people make comments such as, well, of course they couldn't speak English, or people making fun of accents. I really hate that. And let me
Agree.
be clear, even doing it legally, immigrating is incredibly difficult for anyone. I think most Americans don't realize that. I have nothing but respect for legal immigrants as a result. I can tell you firsthand, it is so psychologically and physically difficult to pick up, leave a country where you know the language, the customs, you have family and friends, and go somewhere where you can't speak a word. You have to find a job, learn the language, try to support yourself, and if you have a family, support your family. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, can any of you even imagine doing something like that today? I can't. I witnessed it with my parents and my husband firsthand. So how many of you think you could do it? However, I can understand people who are persecuted or live under dictatorships or tyrannical regimes wanting to come here. But doing it legally is really the only way. Otherwise, you create problems for yourselves and the host country, or in this case, us. That makes things harder all round. So let's talk some more about illegal immigration, Beverly.
Well, the second half of the 20th century introduced legislation by several presidents that addressed illegal immigration. There was the IRCA, Immigration Reform Act under Ronald Reagan, and that aimed to curb undocumented immigrants through employer sanctions and increased border enforcement while providing legal status to nearly 3 million immigrants. Then George H.W. Bush signed a 1992 executive order prohibiting migrants arriving by sea. Then Barack Obama, from 2009 to 2017, deported 3 million immigrants, more than any U.S. sitting president in history.
And by the way, I hate to interrupt, but by the way, you recall nobody said a word about his deportations, did they?
No, no, that's true. And it's very, very true. And none of the social media or any media that we listen to ever even reported it. And you and I both know, and a lot of people know, that Donald Trump has very little tolerance for illegal immigration. But the media is quick to point out that there were family separations under Trump. When Obama in 2014 had children in chain link enclosures. Irene, I have to say something. Also, seniors, let your fingers do the Googling. Remember how we used to say that if you wanted to find out something, you let your fingers do the yellow pages?
Walking,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, so let's do the Googling and find out how President Obama had children in these enclosures in Nogales, Arizona. He separated them from their families, and they all blamed it on Trump. So, and also there were illegal crossings. They surged during Biden's administration. And this created problems with violence, rape, murder from criminals that crossed our borders. You know, Irene, they committed heinous crimes against American citizens. And I get so teary about the people like Laken Riley, Jocelyn Nungare, Rachel Morin, Molly Tibbetts, Kayla Hamilton, Sarah Root, and Kate Steinle. These young women were never given the opportunity to have a productive life. Their lives were taken away. And for what? So that the politicians in this country can get more votes to stay in power? Illegal aliens don't vote, at least not legally, although that is the goal of the extreme left. They prosper in a system that protects them with any children that are born in the United States. At least that's what the extreme left is trying to do. Although birthright citizenship is still with the Supreme Court, they want them to receive benefits like SNAP, Medicaid, and to be entitled to protections like due process. Some blue states offer free health care. On the other hand, all of us seniors pay extremely high supplemental health care costs. Where is the justice or the equality in this? Irene, is this fair?
No, not at all. We all pay through the nose for our benefits. Folks, we've been invaded. There really is no other word for it. And it's already creating chaos and havoc in so many ways to our American way of life. For example, have you tried to go to an emergency room lately? Federal law mandates all hospitals must treat the injured, ill, regardless of their ability to pay. And that's a good thing. However, the illegals learned this one fact very quickly as soon as they came across the border. So if you get into an ER within 8 hours just to be seen, you're doing very well. It's become out of control for patients as well as for hospital staff who are overburdened, and the people who work there just can't handle it. How about schools? Again, teachers are overburdened by pupils who don't speak English, and they don't have the adequate resources to teach all of them. As a result, students who are English speakers are often overlooked or given a lower priority. They don't get that much time spent with them. All budgets are being spent on ESL, or English as a second language, for those who don't speak English. Another insanity. Our students' scores for their math reading skills were already abysmal, but now are even going to be worse. And how about crime? We've all heard about criminal illegal gangs trafficking women and children. Trafficking women and children.
Mhm.
In fact, this just drives me out of my mind. In fact, the U.S. has become the #1 center for human trafficking in the world. It used to be Thailand, but guess what? We overtook them. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Criminal illegals have committed criminal acts like murder, rape, child abuse on hundreds, if not thousands, probably unreported, on American citizens. They've taken over apartment buildings and complexes in some states.
Yes, Irene, the facts speak for themselves. Illegal immigration comes with an enormous price tag, and the taxpayers are paying for it.
Hmm.
Number one, drugs. Drug cartels exploit border vulnerabilities with migrant and drug smuggling. This is another billion-dollar industry. U.S. Customs and Border Protection seized over 27 pounds of fentanyl in 2023, enough to kill millions of people. Fentanyl is the primary drug trafficked across the United States borders and the main cause of overdose deaths of our youth. Some states are giving driver's licenses to illegal aliens. In California, an illegal immigrant doesn't have to speak English or read signs, and they can be given a commercial driver's license. Just recently, a 21-year-old truck driver from India, who was in the United States illegally, by the way, was arrested for a fatal 8-vehicle crash killing 3 people in Ontario, California. He was charged with vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated and driving under the influence. ICE lodged a detainer for his deportation following legal proceedings. But guess how long that's going to take? Taxpayer dollars are being spent for his care and legal fees. Prior to that, there was a similar incident in Florida resulting in innocent deaths.
Yes, I recall that one.
Yeah.
And Beverly, I think we need to talk a little bit about sanctuary states and cities at this point, because that is a prevalent factor in all of this. Sanctuary cities, states, and their progressive extreme left leaders continue to try and protect these illegal criminals. They impede any efforts by law enforcement, that is ICE, to try and detain and deport them. They continue to spout forth lies about ICE's illegal actions, which they are not, by the way. In fact, I want to bring up 2 important points here. The first, one of the things that the extreme left is very, very good at is propaganda. Goebbels, one of Hitler's henchmen in the 30s, perfected Propaganda 101. That is, you tell the public a lie and repeat it again and again, over and over, and eventually people will believe it. And that is what the extreme left, with the help of their media friends, has become very good at. They keep repeating the lie that the illegals are being harassed and rounded up without due process or warrants. Folks, this is not true. Illegal aliens are not afforded the same rights that citizens are. They do not have any right to due process nor use of warrants in their search or arrest. They can only appeal to an administrative law judge for immigration. That is the law, and that's in our Constitution. Look it up. But the extreme left keeps repeating this over and over again, and people are believing it. Again, I think one of the best things that the left extremists are good at is propaganda. I can't repeat it enough. They do it extremely well. And please note that we are not calling the extreme left Democrats because we don't want to insult all Democrats. There are many of you who are moderates, while the extreme left is a minority in your party, but it seems to be taken over it. And as we mentioned in an earlier episode, moderates seem to be afraid of them and will not speak out against them, including those members in Congress. Their leaders encourage violence and protests, which is resulting in chaos and death in some places. So why are these left extremist leaders protecting known criminals at the expense of protecting their own American citizens? Again, does this make any sense whatsoever? How can any rational human being understand this? You can't. They're making political statements, again, against Trump, but that's not a policy. They will do everything and anything, and I repeat, they will do everything and anything they can to hold on to their illegals, because it's the only thing they have. They're counting on the illegals to be counted in the census, thereby increasing their geographic totals for a redistribution, making them eligible for more seats in Congress and the Electoral College. So that's why they're doing this, plain and simple. They don't care about anything else. There's no other viable reason there, is there? So currently, we have close to 17 sanctuary states in this country, and roughly close to 1,000 municipalities who also proclaim sanctuary status. They harbor 45% of these illegals. California has 22% of the overall illegals in the country. Texas and Florida recently banned any local sanctuary status. They should be going after Congress, who made the immigration laws that ICE is enforcing, not ICE. Again, they'll take something, turn it upside down, making it an absurdity, and keep repeating lies about it over and over until you believe it. But folks, don't believe any of it. Use your common sense. And I still believe most of the American public does not agree with them. Most of us do have common sense.
Well, you would hope so, Irene. Although, and I also think about, illegals really are not eligible for welfare. We know that. However, 80% of Somalians in Minnesota are on welfare, and they experience high rates of poverty and unemployment, thereby exhausting the system and taxpayer dollars. The far left politicians are thrilled about having these wonderful people dependent on the government because the more dependent that they are, the more that they can control them. They encourage them to go out and protest. It's seditious.
Mhm, mhm.
Irene, I would like to share something here. I often wondered why some people can be misled by the media today. How can you just take the word of the far left commentators who continually go against everything Donald Trump does? He's really done so much for this country in just 1 year, and yet he's constantly demonized. And the far left believe every word. They believe every word that the media puts out. President Trump is the only president that has closed the border when the prior president had the largest influx of illegal immigrants in United States history. There's a quote: "The eyes cannot see what the mind does not know." This quote refers to the act of looking at something without it registering or understanding what's going on. Irene, some people will just never get it.
That's that's really so incredibly true. And Beverly, illegals are getting financial benefits and aid, not from federally funded programs so much, but from state programs like the DREAM Act for California and Minnesota, where they get tuition money. Colorado has special funds for unemployment benefits for illegals who are parolees and with special circumstances. And let's not forget about New York City during the Biden era, when they were busing illegals into the city by the thousands, putting them up at 3, 4 star hotels and giving them food, phones, credit cards for several $100s. More insanity. And some are claiming SNAP or food stamp benefits, especially for their children, who they say were born here. However, again, as we said before, birthright citizenship is still to be determined by the Supreme Court. So let's not forget our security or lack of it because of this massive illegal immigrant invasion. So within this influx of illegals, we now have a very, very large Muslim population. By the way, there are close to 2 billion Muslims in the world, or 26% of the world population. They are the second largest religion, with Christianity having close to 2.5 billion. And within our illegal population, it is estimated that approximately 2 million are Muslims. And within that 2 million, it is estimated that 1% are Islamists in the world, or extreme radical Muslims. But that's still a large number. 1% of 2 million is large.
Yeah.
And perhaps likewise, at least 1% for those that are now within our borders. The truth is, we don't know. We don't know how many are here. And we are not bringing this all up because we are against Muslims. On the contrary, everyone should be aware that Islam, or the religion of Islam of most Muslims, is nonviolent and peace loving. And that's how they refer to their religion and culture, which is over 1,000 years old. However, Islamism or extreme Islamists are in favor of strict interpretation of Islamic laws, like Sharia, going back to the 7th century, and are politically linked to the 20th century and being extremely radical. They promote violence against enemies, such as the same thing that ISIS does, and are more of a political movement. And these are the ones we should be vigilant about. As 1%, as I mentioned before, 1% of 2 billion is really a very large number. And again, we don't know how many are here within our borders, and that's the scary part. U.S. cities which have the largest Muslim populations in the U.S. are New York, Dearborn, Michigan, Houston, and L.A. In fact, this is an interesting fact a lot of you won't know about. In Texas, East Plano, and in Tampa currently, there are attempts going on to build epic cities, which would allow only Muslims to buy houses there and are completely run by Sharia law. Governors of both Texas and Florida are fighting these efforts now.
Well, what are some possible solutions to illegal immigration? I often think about that. Thankfully, President Trump campaigned on closing the border, and guess what? He did. President Trump is prosecuting those impeding ICE lawful activities. I mean, talk about those protesters out there now. They should be all put in jail.
Yeah,
Trump has
yeah.
spoken of enacting the Insurrection Act of 1887. By definition, it makes sense. He hasn't done it yet, but it may be forced to do so if these protesters to continue to invoke violence against the ICE agents. A little bit about the act. Its purpose is to restore order when state and local authorities are unable or unwilling to enforce the law or when rebellion hinders the enforcement of United States laws through the usual court system. Presidential authority. The Act grants the president broad power to address unlawful obstructions, combinations, or assemblages or rebellion. And that's basically what's going on right now.
Right, right.
Conditions for use. The president can deploy troops under the Act at the request of a state governor or legislature or without state consent if the state fails to protect constitutional rights. And guess what? Isn't that happening right now, Irene?
Right, right.
Okay. It has been used by past presidents, including Jefferson, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, and George H.W. Bush. Thank God Donald Trump has curtailed the influx of immigrants into this country by restoring the rule of law, delivering a safe place and a border, removing dangerous criminal aliens, and creating safer communities. However, no matter what he does, he can find a cure for cancer or build a White House on the moon, and the far left extremists will rage against him.
Yeah, that's
It's true.
unbelievable. It
I
keeps
mean,
happening over and over.
every time he does something, I mean, it's like Trump this, Trump that. It's unbelievable. Folks, we've given you a lot of information today, things that you can and should discuss with your friends and families. You need to speak up. You need to stand up for this country. Remember, we want to encourage all of our seniors to stand up for their liberty and beliefs. And illegal immigration is one of the dangers and challenges facing our society right now.
Thank you, Beverly. Thanks, and thanks so much. And thanks to all of you for being with us today. Remember, please subscribe to our channel and give us your feedback. Our next episode will focus more on immigration and outside influencers and the many influencers that are affecting our country that you all need to be aware of. So see you next time on YouTube and Spotify. Thanks again.
Thank you.